What's the worst case you've seen of someone trying to play the victim when it was all their own fault? My mom ruined my courthouse wedding, called me selfish and made fun of my shoes on my wedding day, and made me swear to her that I wouldn't tell our family I was getting married until we had a big ceremony, then proceeded to go behind my back and tell people anyway. She is now genuinely surprised that I am upset and going around crying to all my aunts and uncles about how her only daughter will not speak to her. I was in a crowded parking lot, driving around looking for a space. There was one car ahead of me. The car ahead of me stopped, so I stopped as well. I'm not sure why she stopped because there were no empty spaces and no one was pulling out, but whatever. Then, before I even had time to react, her reverse lights came on and she came flying backwards towards me. I didn't even have time to honk. She slammed into the front of my car, got out of her car, and started screaming that I hit her. When officers arrived, she was crying and shaking and complaining that her neck hurt, and cursing me for slamming into the back of her car. Thankfully, 2 people had been walking through the parking lot when this occurred and told the officer what really happened. Later, the driver of the car that hit me tried to tell her insurance company that I knew the witnesses and that's why they lied. I didn't know the witnesses, by the way. At any rate, if the witnesses hadn't stuck around to give statements, I'd have been screwed. My Bill, wife's brother, everything is terrible in his life because everyone conspires to be mean to him. All his drug problems are other people's fault. The government never should have taken his kid from him, because he's a good father. When his disabled mother got custody of his kid and then let him move in with them, she made up all those stories about him hitting her and the kid. When the government, both APS and CPS, told us we had to protect them from him, we had no right to take his kid, that he hadn't had custody of for years. He lives off disability for back problems he said since getting a beat down for running his mouth at the wrong people, despite the fact his doctors tell him he doesn't need a wheelchair and can work. It's our fault he can't pay his bills, even though he's still living in his mother's house rent-free, and that surely has nothing to do with the fact that he blows his disability check on drugs and junk food as soon as he gets it. In his mind, we abandoned him to die and are horrible people for not letting him live with us, despite the fact that the government literally put his mother and kid in our care to keep them safe from him. He came up with a scheme where he called 911 to be taken to the local hospital. When he got there he told them he was dying because he was wheelchair-bound and abandoned in a squalid house. The house became squalid after the mother and kid were removed because he refused to clean and had a dog he never let outside. He actually got Adult Protective Services to call us and tell us we had to take care of him and fix up his house. By the way, we live 250 miles away in a different state. We explained the history and gave them the names of the case workers for his mother and son, who know him well. APS confirmed what we told them. When APS told him we didn't agree to let him live with us, he demanded they file a court order to force us to allow him to live in our home. APS told him that wasn't actually a thing that could happen, so he started screaming profanities at everyone in the hospital. She called us from the hospital. We heard him screaming. When the doctors told him, again, he didn't need a wheelchair, he screamed at them. They discharged him, but he refused to leave on his own, so they sent him home in an ambulance. He refused to get out, so they wound up driving him back to the hospital and leaving him on a gurney in the ER waiting room. After 8 hours, when he still refused to leave, they had security drag him out and dump him in the parking lot. A few weeks later he's calling us begging us to pay his bills and goes off again on how we had no right to take his kid from him, and we're terrible people because we refused to acknowledge what a good father he is. He lives in the rural South. Do you know what it takes for CPS to take your kid in a poor county in the South? We're talking immediate danger to life. Not only did they do that, and then a judge permanently took away his custody, but then they came back and said the kid and his mother weren't safe in the same house as him, and we stole his kid. I raised my kids, they've graduated and are adults. I have zero desire to raise another kid, let alone one who has significant emotional issues from being abused. But guess what? I am. Because I'm not a total piece of shit, and I can't turn my back on them. But in my brother-in-law's eyes, this is all a vast conspiracy to spy at him. Sometimes my children ask me why they've met my mother but never met my father. I tell them he died a long time ago when I was a kid. In reality, my dad used to be an abusive drunk, and my mother had to kick him out because he used to beat on us kids. We used to spend weekends at his new house, but around the time I turned 10 he told my mother to stop dropping us off, and gave her a shoebox full of all the pictures he had of us. We tried calling him on holidays every now and again, but he finally just told us to stop contacting him altogether. Last year my mother passed away, and he decided to reach out to me and expressed he had changed and wanted to make things up to me. I told him it was okay. I filled him in on how I was doing in life and sent him pictures of my children, but I expressed I was already a man, and don't need a father anymore. But he was forgiven for the 20-year absence. He then proceeded to tell me that I'm horrible for pushing him away and abandoning him, that he was dying and just wanted to fix things. So I just explained to him, it's already forgiven, but he abandoned me and I had no time for his foolishness. I wish things would have been different, but he's too much of a bad influence to allow in my children's lives. An employee was being fired for a multitude of infractions at a coffee shop. He had been caught by management calling customers things like dumbass and stupid fuck under his breath, and several customers had also reported the behavior. He was constantly late or would leave early or beg others to cover his shift. Instead of restocking or cleaning the area during downtimes, he would take out his drumsticks and practice, which annoyed the other employees and customers. During inventory counts we noticed whole pallets of sandwiches or baked goods were missing, as well as bottled drinks, etc. We were mysteriously out of huge 5-pound bags of the espresso roast. The numbers were not adding up. He was subsequently fired after being caught bad-mouthing a customer while a visiting manager was also in the cafe. The guy didn't know it. The guy blamed all the issues on everyone else. Late to work turned into I missed the bus or my roommate forgot to wake me up in time. Leaving early turned into well I got a call for a gig / there was a concert I wanted to see. Food missing turned into I didn't have money to eat and it's the company's responsibility to ensure I'm fed while on the clock. Calling customers names turned into they misunderstood me. Management said what part of calling a customer a dumb fuck is a misunderstanding? Followed by not my fault, they're so sensitive. All this dude's problems were blamed on everyone else and all his issues and situation in life was blamed on everyone else. Us employees stopped inviting him out because at bars he would order drinks and tell the bartender one of us was covering and skip out or leave rapidly before check was presented to us. He would also walk around tables when people got up to dance or talk in a group and guzzle down their drinks. He was an all-over shitty person. Found out after he was fired from our store he was hired by a Starbucks in the mall, who failed to call for a reference or check even though our store was listed as previous place of employment. He was caught stealing money and food from there too. Edit. I wanted to add this was our worst employee. We had another guy who worked his ass off but had a generally bad demeanor, but he was a solid hard worker. One day he sat down and watched the drummer dude spout his mouth off and treat customers like shit and turned to me and said I hope to God I don't sound or act like that. Just from watching this one guy, the other employee became a model customer service employee almost overnight. Also, we had another guy there. He went by some weird animal name instead of his real name. He was sent home for showing up drunk several times and was let go after management found he snuck a bottle of vodka in and was adding it to girls' drinks during the late shift. I quit my job and set up my own competitive business with my ex-employer after he failed to pay me for 2 months, claiming non-payment from the clients. He had a massive go at me after I confronted him with receipts from the clients to show payment, and he accused me of making him look bad in front of his clients and that he didn't owe me the money because some people are bosses and some people are employees, hence why I quit the job and set up for myself because last time I checked, slavery is illegal in the UK. I also warned a few of my ex-coworkers to be careful and not let him rack up debt with them because of what he did to me. They are nice people with young families and don't deserve to be taken advantage of, like he did to me. I take him to court to try to recoup the money he owed me for the work I completed, and the judge ruled in my favor for the full amount of just over £4,000. He then plays the victim card with everyone he knows and says that I made him and his family homeless despite the fact that he never paid me a penny of the money owed. £4,000 is like 5 to 6 months rent in a decent neighborhood in my city. Honestly blows my mind every time I think about it. Short story, the dude stole over £4,000 from me, never pays me back, blames me for making his family homeless. Local business owner / friend asked a lot of his regular customers to invest in his new business in Atlanta, by buying shares. I bought in, knowing we wouldn't break even for at least 3 years, but that he could sell religion to the Pope. Had losses for 2 years, break even at 3 as predicted. 4 years in, he closes the Atlanta store and opens in another town, but this time he's doing it all with his own money. Bullshit, he's doing it with the inventory and proceeds from the Atlanta store. Even has a shiny new house, cars, the works for his new venture. He's shocked to the core, and hurt, I tell you, hurt and disappointed. When all the shareholders took him to court. Edit. Wow, this blew up. Thanks for the gold in the comments and the concern. Our lawsuit basically never got off the taxiway, and as one of the good Redditors below mentioned, it soon looked like the cost of going through the courts would quickly outpace our losses. People started dropping off and it fell apart. The original store and the Atlanta store were closed. Those bridges he well and truly burned. The final store has changed names but appears to be going strong. No way in hell will I name the business. I don't doubt for a second that while we smaller potato investors weren't ready for a long court fight, the owner would have no qualms about bringing a defamation suit against me in a heartbeat. Sometimes, karma is just asleep at the wheel and you have to accept it.